All right. Well, let's we can get started with those of us who are here and just run through what we might want to look at today. I think so I sent around to folks the little Google Drive folder that I put together that includes, the documents we've been working on, the spreadsheets, but then also the also kind of the assessments that we've got so far. So folks should have that available. So I think we've now either got or have accounted for assessments for basically all the bills, with the exception of perhaps one that I can talk about in a minute. And I'm still waiting for, I think Senator Libby is still working on some of his to hand in, but I think other than that, folks have passed them in. So those are really helpful, which is great. Thank you all for working away on those. I think sort of the process that we started on Wednesday in identifying ones that could be top tier priorities that we wanted to really highlight would still be a useful exercise to go through. I've got at least one that I wanted to flag for whether we still wanted to include it at all. Because I was having a hard time sort of figuring that out, whether it would have an impact. But if there are others like that we wanted to make a case for knocking off the list, we could also think about that. I think in terms of the presentation on Monday, it's relatively straightforward, but we could think the other thing we could discuss is whether people have a preference for like how we present that. We could do it with folks sort of presenting the bills that they have personally done the assessment on, or if it makes more sense, I don't mind. Even I can volunteer to read through the whole the list that we have. So those are sort of the questions that I had out there, but I'm willing to. Anything else folks want to discuss as well, we can do that too.
So James, just a quick question. So I'm trying to pull up the sheets as we're talking about that. So I see the subcommittee for bills to keep. Is that the list that we're working on to consolidate even from the other list that we had, right? In terms of what we're actually going to be presenting on Monday.
Yeah, I added a column in there that talks about whether we think it's a top tier bill or not. And so that's sort of just what I'm working on right now. So,
oh, I see it now. Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
And James, question, and thanks for doing all this.
Yeah.
We're also sent another tool to prioritize bills.
Mm-hmm.
Is that for the committee as a whole, or is that for every individual?
Yeah, is that the one that was sent around that has sort of the E columns? Yeah, I think that's for all of us. Each of us fills that out for every bill in the whole committee. So as we're listening to the presentations and getting information from the other subcommittees, we're also filling out that sheet. So the idea is that everyone will be giving a version of that sheet that has every bill filled out. So
why would we simultaneously be prioritizing bills in the process we go through and then fill them out individually?
I think the idea is so that we can, the process we've gone through this week is to be able to provide more information to the full committee. And then I think the hope is that we can, the reason we might want to prioritize some for our presentation on Monday rather than others is just for ease of time. So, because we only have like whatever it is, 15 or 20 minutes to make the presentation, we may want to spend more time on some bills than others. So.
Well, it's just that my thought was that, if we're going to prioritize bills in the committee, then why would I fill out another form that potentially would have different priorities?
Right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. So are you thinking, rather than trying to tell the full committee that we think some of these are a higher priority than others, just sort of present them all as we have them?
Well, again, not to belabor it, but I just thought that what we've been going through with these meetings is getting to a point we have 5, 10, 15, 20 bills that we agree, are priority. And then I'm sitting here, it's either I take that form and I just fill in those 20 bills that we've already established as a priority, or I go through independently and rank them differently than we have in the subcommittee. And that doesn't seem to be too terribly helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I think the value of the assessment tool is going to be, or the one that got sent around most recently is going to be with us, like looking at the bills that weren't in our own committee. I think it's fine if like the results for the bills that we've already worked on our individual sheets look the same, but it gives us a chance to weigh in on what we think we've heard from the presentations about the other subcommittees. Does that make sense?
So that other form, I could look at all 425 bills.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be I don't think it'll be all 425. It's only the ones that the subcommittees have decided to keep.
Okay, but then I could pick on subcommittee 1 and say, I think this bill in that committee is a priority for me. More than I might have as a priority within subcommittee 4.
Sorry, can you say that again? I think you blipped out for a second.
Well, so I could look at subcommittee 1's recommendations and say, I think this bill in subcommittee 1 is more of a priority to me than what we may have a priority in sub 4.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Because we were assigned all our subcommittee bills kind of randomly, so. And I think it's just a way of, I think the subcommittees, the idea is the subcommittees, the work we've been doing is sort of, cutting down that list of 60 bills we had down to 20. And then, so it's sort of a filtering process, but then there's still a chance for the full committee to weigh in on all the bills so that we get more voices and more, just more opinions about the full list of bills than just the 6 or 7 people who are on each subcommittee. So.
Okay. And was there an expectation that every legislator would also fill in that priority list? It seemed to indicate at the end that it was optional for legislators.
I think the idea is that everyone will fill it out. I think those are all going to go to the permanent commission that's going to sort of try and find the best way to make the final list of recommendations. But I think the idea is that every legislator, as well as permanent committee members, fill out those like the spreadsheets.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I know there's a lot of instructions flying around, and it's a little hard to keep up with all of them. So. Well, I'm happy to kick things off and I wanted to run by a couple of things that had come up for me when I filled out sort of the remaining assessments that hadn't been spoken for yet. One was on LD 657, which is an act to reorganize the probate courts. I had a hard time sort of figuring out what the racial impact of that bill was going to be and why exactly it made it into a higher tier in our process. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with that or remembers sort of what we discussed about that.
I haven't looked it up yet, but is this the concept bill from Representative Cardone?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. The only reason I thought we would look at it is because probate court deals with child welfare and custody issues. And those are disproportionately affect typically families that are struggling with a number of different issues, including income.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that. That's good to know. Yeah, the probate court term made me just think of sort of wills and estates and things. So.
Well, you can get your name changed in probate court too.
Okay, I had to do that for one of my kids actually. So we named one of our babies one thing and then changed it. So that was a process. All right, good to know.
But the probate court is more of a family court.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I thought the Judiciary Committee was working on, and I don't know if they were using this bill as the vehicle, but they had set up like either a task force or a subcommittee or something to analyze the entirety of the probate court system and figure out, are there improvements that need to be made? And I don't know if that's like the bill vehicle they're using just to hash out those things. So it may not necessarily be directly prudent to our conversation because of the uniqueness of that dynamic. But again, I don't know if that's the vehicle that is referencing that task force work.
Mhm.
And the other issue that has come up perennially is that probate judges are elected.
Mm.
The only judges in the state that are elected in the past, to have probate judges folded in the probate court to the regular court system and have the judges appointed and nominated by the governor and appointed by the legislature. But I'm pretty sure it's in the state constitution, and that's why you might have to amend the constitution in order to appoint rather than elect probate judges. But
Right.
it's a big anomaly to have probate judges be elected.
Right. I was just quickly reading over Representative Cardone's testimony, and what this does is clean up work that was started, she says, in 1967, and that it's time to finish the task of repealing the part of the Constitution that requires that probate judges be elected, and I think that that's what the essence of the bill is, rather than anything else at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, I would say it's not directly relevant to the discussion we're having now.
Right.
So we can remove it from the list then.
I think so. I think that it's a technical bill, and it doesn't modify the work of the probate courts at all. It just talks about the election of probate judges.
Mm.
So I would put that down the bottom, or maybe even off the list.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm glad we figured that through. All right, good. I think that was sort of the primary one that had raised the biggest amount of flags or questions for me. The bills we had discussed last time are sort of maybe rising to the top of what we had. I think we're still looking to get, I don't think we received yet the copy of the amendment for LD 1067 about indigent legal services. So that's still an outstanding question. I think we had, so the ones that I have flagged are 2056, which was trying to look at the plan for the sort of chronically or frequently homeless population. We've got 920, which was about purchasing locally produced food. 1403, which was the general assistance reimbursement changes. 2141, which was about main care services for children with disabilities. 1158, I think, just came up, just sort of flagged for questions a little bit. Partly because of the other changes that had happened to the property tax fairness credit in the meantime. And then 1422, which was about the women's, the incarcerated female population, was also flagged as well. So.
We had also had questions, I'm trying to grab the number on Representative Warren's bill with regard to funding the regional sites for mental health care, and it turns out rather than having individual sites and moving forward in that direction, it was just a general funding for those services that are already in place. So it's not an expansion. It's not adding what I thought would be an improvement, which was the specific sites that would be operated 24/7. That has fallen off the bill. So it's just an appropriation more than anything else.
Yeah, thank you. When you guys are ready for me, this is Representative Charlotte Warren, and I'd love to give more information about 803.
Oh, that's the number. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah,
Yes, you're welcome.
That'd be great, I think. Yeah, thank you, Representative Warren.
Great. Are you ready for me now?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So LD 803 I originally put in during the first year of the 129th. And then through my work as the House Chair of the Mental Health Working Group, we as a unanimous working group changed that bill away from creating more bricks and mortar. I realized that I had sort of been enchanted by the shiny new thing of building these assessment centers, these 4 assessment centers across the state. As it turns out, what we already have, which are these crisis lines, mobile crisis response, and these crisis stabilization units, they are actually backed by the evidence. They are what we are seeing as a response to reforming police right now in our country. Across our country, they're what people are switching to because they're evidence-based practice. And so just the really quick and dirty, it's an appropriation. How I amended it was an appropriation for basically fully funding 3 things we already have. Lines that people can call and the police can call when somebody's in a mental health crisis. Mobile crisis, which can be dispatched not only to where maybe myself or someone else that's having a mental health crisis is, but also that the police can call. We in Maine have, 911 and police as our first responders to mental health crises. A mobile response is somebody that can meet police wherever they are out in the field and take over that case so that our folks who are experiencing mental health crises don't end up either in the emergency room or a jail. And the third part of that bill are these crisis stabilization units. These are the least expensive and they're very effective. They're places where when someone just needs a couple of days to get themselves back together, there's a bed for them there. They don't need to go to a hospital. They don't need to go to a county jail, right? And this idea of the crisis stabilization unit, it allows people to, get their meds back on track or be de-escalated, whatever that looks like, by folks like me who are social workers and like Representative Brennan who's on the phone, and gets them back to their families, back to their jobs, so they aren't losing housing, et cetera. So that's what we did. We amended the bill to fund those things that already exist. And then last Wednesday, HHS sort of stripped out what my policy recommendations were, or I should say our policy recommendations, and turned it into a straight appropriation in order to divert people from the criminal justice system. So I'm happy to answer questions, but that is the long and the short of it, is to keep people out of the jails and the hospitals, and give them a chair instead of a bed.
I believe that when we had our first discussion, Chief Sillyboy was not necessarily in favor of this bill because it was creating more bricks and mortar. I'm not sure whether his opinion would change, knowing that it's just financing for programs that are already in place. And is this also answering the question that we've been tasked with? How can this directly affect the Black and Indigenous people of color that we're looking at helping?
Yes, absolutely. And what we know is that when folks who are not trained for a mental health crisis, substance use disorder, I also didn't mention that, that's how the populations of our places of incarceration are rising, right? Because
Yes.
when police show up, they don't have the tools. You know, they may want to be helpful. They don't have the time to spend with someone who needs the sort of help that a substance use disorder situation or a mental health crisis situation requires. They don't have the time for that, but they also don't have the skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely is, in my mind, definitely fits the bill here. You know, in Maine, there's a reason why we have such high incarceration rates of persons of color, although we have less than 2% of our population as persons of color. And
Right.
this is absolutely a way to stop that pipeline, slow that pipeline down.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just very quickly, I agree with everything Representative Warren said. And in fact, initially when the bill came out, she and I had discussion because I was worried about creating new emergency rooms by having regional places where people would go to. And the thing that follows best practice and evidence-based practice, it would allow somebody that's experiencing a crisis around mental health to be treated right in their home and not have to go to the emergency room, not have to have a confrontation with the police and law enforcement, and hopefully be able to resolve the situation in the least invasive way. And we had teams like this back in the 2010, 2005 that cut over the last 10 years. So sort of treatment teams and ACT teams that used to be able to go in the community and meet with people in crisis within the community rather than using extensive interventions with emergency rooms and criminal justice. So I'm glad, Charlotte, that you were able to amend the bill. And I'm sorry they stripped out the policy recommendations, and you'll see how the money goes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for giving that overview, Representative Warren. I think that's super helpful. And it seems like, especially given all the discussion that's going on right now about policing, it seems especially important. So it's good to get that clarity on that one. Yeah, I mean, to me, that seems like a bill that should be one of our higher recommendations if we're gonna have a set that we think are particularly important to talk about, just because of all the reasons that have been cited. Do other folks agree?
I agree.
Okay, hearing no objections, I will note that in there. Were there, so we've got about half an hour left. Do we have other bills that folks wanted to talk about or ask questions or discuss?
So James, I know last time Nate had made a good point around, and I'm just going to pull it up so I can reference it. It was the property tax. It was converting the current property tax fairness credit to the levels that were under the previous circuit breaker program. And again, I think that's a really good idea. I think Nate made a good point of like, is that going to be targeted relief? Is that going to really get at what we're trying to talk about? So I don't know if that's something that we can, if we feel collectively that we need to remove from the list or not have it as a priority in conjunction with some of the other items that we might have. Again, I think it helps keep people in their homes, but it's hard to then say like, well, who are we really talking about in the existing population versus potentially getting people in purchasing home ownership, which creates generational wealth opportunities for persons of color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd started to try and do a little brief digging around in that. It's not necessarily easy, but to look at like household costs and see, you know, if I'm just going to try and see if I can pull it up. If there are more folks, you know, if this does disproportionately impact. I think, I mean, it does seem like if you look at some of the census data on like how much families spend on rent compared to their income, it is so it does certainly look like, white families are much less likely to be in this group than either Black families, Latinx families, or Native American ones, which are the ones that I ran the numbers for. So if you look at like families that are spending more than 10% of their income on rent, you've got 6% of white non-Hispanic families versus like 15% of Black families. And the numbers are sort of similar for the other groups as well. So I think you can certainly make the case that it would disproportionately help these groups. The question though is just like how large an impact it's going to have, or like whether that's enough because it's not targeted. Because of course the majority of people being helped are still going to be sort of white non-Hispanic families.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with keeping it. I know we had talked about it last time, and I know we're trying to, pare down some of the bills, but I'm fine with keeping it if that's reflects that. I think, and I can put it in my comments, but I think we would need to change some of the language if we were to try to target that relief, or at least try to get, because obviously folks have to apply for this on a regular basis. Maybe I'd be curious to know, of those that are applying, how many are persons of color? Are they getting the applications? Are they filling out the applications? And I think that was the point that Nate made last time.
Yeah.
That might be an area of focus.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting point. Yeah, to ask about like who's applying for this and who's receiving it. Yeah, and I know that in the we've done some work on type and talk, which obviously never really works very well. We've done some work on MECEP at trying to push out sort of awareness of credits that are available to people, because the very lowest income folks don't have to file taxes if they don't owe any. And obviously that leaves out some folks who may be eligible just for credits, don't necessarily claim them. So it would be interesting to try and get some information if we know like who are the folks, is there work that can be done, which is even more low-hanging fruit without like targeting some of these folks at outreach to actually get them to file for the money they're entitled to. Okay, well, I'm happy to have, to sort of structure how we might want to present things to, we've got, by my count, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7, maybe 8 bills that we might want to sort of like spend more time on as being more impactful, or ones that we want to draw particular attention to, at least. Maybe we could phrase it that way. And then the others can sort of also be included, but we could just have those 8 or so, 7 or 8 first. So that feels like a more efficient way to do the presentation than potentially trying to go through every bill that we have and try and give sort of a 10-second summary on it, or whatever we end up doing. If that makes sense for other folks, I think we should do that as our plan going forward. Do people have thoughts on whether they want to be able to sort of chime in with the bills that they particularly worked on, or does it make sense just to have one person to sort of be the spokesperson for the group?
Well, I guess, James, that's a little bit up to you in the sense that if you feel comfortable making one presentation for the subcommittee, I think that would work probably a little bit better than having 5 or 6 people chiming in at different points.
Yeah.
I think so also. I found that last, at the first presentation, that group 1 did a fairly good job. I was less, the second and third groups less so, especially the third group that was saying everybody's in except we are wondering about these bills. So I think if we could answer the questions that we've been asked to answer with regard to why we think these bills should move forward. And paring it down to the 6 or 8 bills, and then saying there are other bills, but these are the ones that we think can have a significant impact right now. And being able to say that rather than everybody talking about the individual bills. I think you probably would be able to make the most sanguine arguments for the bills that we would like to see move forward.
Yep, I think that's a good flag to make sure that we actually address those questions too. Well, I'm happy to do that. I think it is more efficient to do it that way, and then I'm happy to have other folks, if I miss something out or if there are things that people wanted to highlight that didn't get in there, I'm happy for folks to chime in as we go along as well. But that works for me as a plan.
Okay, great.
All right. Is there anything else folks wanted to discuss on the call? I mean, otherwise I feel like we're in reasonably good shape for the discussion on Monday, and I'm happy to sort of let us all out a little early to enjoy our Friday.
Thank you. No, I think I'm fine.
Okay. James, just real quick. So those sheets, the most recent, the one we were talking about before, that was sent around, that's for everybody to fill out.
Yeah.
Where are we sending those once? Obviously, we won't have them done until after Monday, but where are we sending those?
I think Reggie sent out an email saying that, so they have to go to Megan Rochello by 3 p.m. on Tuesday.
3 p.m. on Tuesday. Okay, that sounds good.
Yep, cool. Alrighty, great. All right, well, I'll see everyone on Monday, and have a good weekend.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You too, James. Thank you.
Sure, thank you all. Bye.